Alright, today we're going to be removing the auger motor, gearbox, and the auger shaft. It'll come out all as one assembly. So first, to remove it, you want to make sure your stove is unplugged from the wall. Next, we'll remove the two leads that connect the motor to the power block. Try to label them so you can put them back where they go. Once you got those out of the way, grab a 12mm wrench. Take off these four 12mm nuts that hold the bracket in place. Note this little bracket here, the opened end is towards the pellet stove. That way when you're reassembling, you can put it the right way. Get the bottom two off here. Alright, once you get those four off, you should be able just to wiggle it around a little bit. Loosen it up. Try not to rip the gasket, otherwise you're going to have to replace it. It should just slide on out. Like I said, it's all one piece. That's what it looks like, the auger shaft, the auger motor, and the gearbox. Alright, so we're going to take that, set it on our bench. We'll disassemble it so we can clean and lubricate it, get it back in for the next heating season. Alright, now that we got our auger motor assembly out and on the bench, we're going to work on separating the shaft from the gearbox. We're going to do this by removing this set screw. We're going to do that with a 4mm Allen wrench or Allen socket, whichever you prefer. So we're going to stick it in there, crack it loose. Get it real loose. Once you got it loose, you should be able to slide it back. You should be able to separate these two parts. Just give it a little twist and wiggle. Everything should slide apart. Try to keep everything the way you took it off, facing the way you took it off, so you know exactly how it goes back together. If you're not sure of yourself, try to take a still picture with your camera or your phone. That way you can look at it, make sure you have it the right way when you're reassembling. Alright, first we'll start with cleaning the auger shaft. For this, we want to take our degreaser, simple green, purple power, whatever it was. Spray it down, let it soak in, rinse it off. Try to get the ends clean, because that's where the bearings sit. This person looks like they use regular grease, which is not good because it doesn't hold up to the heat that these pellet stoves put off. So I'm going to take a little extra time in cleaning that gunk off. Once you get it clean, dry it off. Take a Scotch-Brite pad. We'll Scotch-Brite down the spiral on both sides, removing that light surface rust, trying to make them as smooth as possible so the pellets will drop into the stove without straining the motor. Once we get that all Scotch-Brited down, we'll Scotch-Brite down the ends where the bearings sit. We try to make sure there's no burrs on there. Once we get them Scotch-Brited down, take your CRC dry graphite lube. We'll spray down both ends where the bearings sit, so when we push them back on there, they'll be lubricated. This stuff is good for this application because it's rated to 850 degrees constant heat. Next, we're going to work on cleaning the washer, bearing, the bracket, and the slip column. We're going to do the same thing as we did before. Take our degreaser, get them degreased, clean off all the heavy stuff. Once we did that, we can dry them off. Once they're dry, we'll take our Scotch-Brite pad, we'll Scotch-Brite them down, make sure there's no burrs on them, make sure they're nice and smooth. Once we got them all Scotch-Brited down, we'll take our CRC graphite lube, we'll spray these three down. For the bracket, just spray the edge right where the bearing is going to ride, and then those are cleaned and lubed and ready to go. Next, we'll move on to the auger motor and the gearbox. For this, you want to take your compressed air, or air in a can, whatever you have, blow it all off, try to get the heavy stuff off. Once it's all blown off, you can take the degreaser we were using before, spray it onto your rag, wipe it down. You don't want to spray it around here because you got the motor, you don't want to get it wet, so you spray it onto the rag, wipe down, try to get as much grime as you can off. Once you have it clean, we'll take our 3-in-1 oil, we'll lubricate the front of the shaft here on the gearbox, we'll also do the back. Then we'll take that 3-in-1 oil, we'll lubricate the motor. It's a good idea to try to spin it. That way it'll spin the gearbox too. It'll let the oil soak in on the shafts. With that part is done. Alright, now we're going to do the stove side. So first we want to look up in the auger shaft here. We want to make sure there's no stuck pellets in there. If there is, we'll take a long-handled screwdriver, knock them loose, get them out of there. Once you've knocked all the big stuff out, we'll take our Scotch-Brite pad we used before. We'll put it up in the hole here. Kind of just move it back and forth. Try to knock off the other debris. Make sure there's no burrs on it. Get it nice and smooth so the pellets will slide out of there. Once that's done, we'll take our compressed air, we'll blow it out, get all the dust out of there. Then we'll take our CRC graphite lube. We'll try to spray it up as high as we can, try to reach that brass bushing that's up on top that holds the auger shaft so it doesn't rub on the housing here. Once you did that, we'll take a shot vac. We'll vacuum out the pellets on the bottom here. We'll take our degreaser we were using before, spray it onto a rag, wipe it down, try to get as much dust and grime out of the bottom of the frame as we can. And then moving on. Alright, now that we have our auger shaft, the auger motor and the gearbox all cleaned up and lubricated. We're going to reassemble them. First, we'll start with the flat washer. We'll slide that onto the shaft. Next, we'll take our bash bearing. We'll take that bigger end, put it towards the spiral of the auger shaft. Next, we'll take our plate, slide that onto the shaft, then onto that bearing. Once you get that in place, we'll grab that collar. This is a set screw. We want to make sure it goes through this hole, so you want to line those up. This screw's got to pass through that hole and tighten onto the shaft. That's how it spins. So slide those so they line up. Tilt this bracket a little bit to keep it out of the way. We'll grab the motor. There's a little dimple on there. I don't know if you can see that. That's where the set screw was before. That's on the flat part of the shaft. That's where the set screw has to line up. So we're going to try to line that set screw up with that mark. Slide it back together. Don't push it all the way tight. You want it a little bit out. You want to make sure this rubber piece is on this side of the motor. Next, we'll take our 4mm Allen wrench, tighten that up, down through, onto the shaft. Make sure they spin together. Once you got that tight, we're done with reassembling. Alright, with your auger shaft, the auger motor, and the gearbox all reassembled as one, it's time to reinstall it in the stove. But before you do, if your stove is equipped with a VersaGrate motor, you might want to clean that first. It's a lot easier to gain access to it with the auger assembly out of the way. Alright, now for the install, you want to make sure your gasket is in position. Next, we'll take the assembly, we'll slide it up in there. Take your time. You don't want to force it. It should just slide in there nice and easily. Once you get that flange nice and tight up against that gasket, we can work on putting the two 12mm nuts up on top. One, do the other. You don't want to thread those all the way down, you just want to get them on there and snug a little bit. Alright, next we'll take our bracket, make sure the open end is towards the pellet stove. You're going to slide it behind those nuts, push it in until you can line the front up and it clicks in like that. Next we'll install the two bottom nuts. Snug the rest of these up now. Then we'll take our 12mm wrench, tighten these up. Alright, with those four tight, we'll reconnect the leads. If you labeled them before, it should be easy. Put them right back where they go. With the two leads reconnected, you're done. It's ready for the next heating season.